Thank you, Clarissa. So I'm also going to share my screen. Kind of bear with me while I do that. Okay. Looks like it's showing for everybody, right? Everyone can see it.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming. My name is Maria, and I will be talking about EFT tapping. And specifically, I wanted to talk about being a regulated parent and how EFT tapping can help us with this. So it's a little bit about me and what I do. So my business is called Parent on Board Coaching. So it really is meant for parents, for moms specifically, but always hoping to get dads in as well. So I do EFT coaching, and if you've never heard about EFT, it's called Emotional Freedom Technique or Tapping, and I'll talk more about it later. And it really is, it's a somatic approach to help you clear past traumas, limiting beliefs, negative thoughts, and a whole lot more things than that. But I love it. I use it personally. And so I love sharing it with everyone. Just as Clarissa did the presentation, self-compassion, I use a lot of self-compassion in my practice as well, because what I'm finding is a lot of parents, especially moms, are very critical towards themselves and towards their children. So self-compassion becomes an integral part in helping us regulate ourselves to be the best parents that we can be. My other pillar that I really focus on is empowerment. I think a lot of us go into parenting doing kind of what our parents did, or doing something that our parents didn't do without really a good roadmap. And we don't always feel empowered to make choices that resonate with us. And part of my coaching is really focusing on empowering my moms to choose the kind of parenting that they want to practice, to choose the kind of motherhood that they want to live in, and essentially to choose the kind of life that they want to live. So let's talk about the dysregulated parent. I'm sure, if you're a parent, these pictures look familiar, even if when you try your best, sometimes it's really, really difficult. Our children trigger us so much. And so a dysregulated or a triggered parent is a parent that's experiencing an intense emotional reaction to something that their child did. And while it looks scary and your children probably really don't like seeing you like this, it is very typical. When we're dysregulated or we're triggered, we're hijacked by emotions and our primitive brain takes over. So really, we are essentially throwing an adult-sized tantrum when our children throw tantrums, and it's really nobody's fault. It's just our nervous system is reacting this way. And a lot of the times, the reason why it's reacting that way kind of is sitting in our past and our own childhood. But here are some typical triggers that can dysregulate parents. With younger kids, especially tantrums, crying, as they get a little bit older, whining is a huge one. So any sort of big emotion as well is really hard to handle for a lot of us. Disobedience, and that one kind of goes across the spectrum from the time they become toddlers all the way up to the time that they are teenagers, maybe even young adults, because a lot of us were brought up in a very authoritarian way, and we were told that we're supposed to follow directions right now, right away. And so when our kids don't do that, it's very triggering for us. Messiness can also be a big trigger for multiple reasons. Sometimes it is because we grew up in a household where we had to clean everything up right away and make sure everything's perfect. Some of it is it's just clutter and dirtiness. It's just too much for our already dysregulated nervous system that's kind of on its last nerve, just to also have even more messiness from our kids. So too much noise. This is something you hear a lot from moms, especially moms of younger kiddos, is that they feel really dysregulated by all the noise. They're so overstimulated. I mean, our kids are noisy. Their games are noisy. They run around, they scream, they like let a lot of energy out. And then also, if you are a parent of multiple kids, very often kids fight, even when we do the best that we can as parents. I mean, they're siblings, they will fight. They are essentially almost like frenemies in a way. They're each other's competitors, even though at other times they're each other's biggest support. So those could be some triggers that will get you dysregulated and get you feeling like you're on your last nerve. So what are the signs that I'm triggered? Like, so when I'm triggered, what do? Um, I'm probably yelling at my kids over the mess or over the noise or whatever. I am probably standing there also threatening them with consequences and punishment. I maybe I'm the kind of a parent who actually can't handle the confrontation because of my own past history. And what I'm feeling is a deep and desperate need to escape. So I'm going to try to run away from the situation. Another one is I might try to appease and bribe the children just to get them to stop because I am so triggered. I have no idea what to do and I just want this to go away. So those are kind of like, if you've ever done any of those are probably times when you were triggered. So, oh, did I go the wrong way? Oh, there we go. Now I went through it. Okay, so as I alluded to it before, what are the reasons that we might be triggered? Well, one of the most obvious ones is that when you were a child, you were probably punished quite a bit. Again, most of us do come either from cultures or from a time period where children were supposed to be seen and not heard. They were supposed to be perfect. Big emotions were not welcome. And in fact, were usually punished. You were either told to, to stop crying. It's not that big of a deal. Or maybe you just got smacked. I don't know, right? Like any of those could have happened, but they're all traumatizing for us as kids. Same thing for messes. When we mess something up or we didn't put away the toys, parents could have yelled at us. Parents could have taken toys away, put them in the trash bin and throw them away, right? Very triggering for us. So when we're in the same situation, it's kind of like the same fight or flight happens. Another one, as I was saying, is that sometimes we have this response called fawn response, and that's when we want to appease somebody, someone who we find threatening. So maybe you were in such a threatening situation that the only way you felt safe was to appease your adults so that they didn't come after you anymore. You might want to do the same with the children now because that's just kind of like your normal response. And another big trigger is a lot of the times only good behavior was rewarded with love and attention because even in psychology knowledge, what used to be taught and still is to this day, unfortunately, is that, when your child misbehaves, ignore them. If your child is, doing something, they're doing it for attention. So if you ignore them, it'll go away. And so we grow up kind of craving that attention. And so when our kids are doing this, it triggers us because we probably would have been really punished for doing that. So here comes the question. If that's what it's like being a parent, how do I stop this? What if I don't want to be a parent who's triggered all the time? Well, there's many ways to go about it, but one of the, I feel like, key and core ways to go about it is by calming our nervous system and then reteaching our amygdala, which is this tiny, tiny little part in our brain in the back that is our threat response, which is the fight, flight, or freeze or fawn response, that situations that used to be dangerous when we were children ourselves aren't dangerous anymore. And again, it's like we are reteaching our brain, we're reprogramming it to stop believing the same myth it believed when it was a child's brain. So we can do that through a lot of things, but EFT tapping and self-compassion are probably one of the ways that I love to go at it. I find it to be very helpful. And the reason why is we end up healing a lot of our childhood trauma. I know trauma is kind of a big word, and maybe for some people, it's also a little bit triggering because we don't like to think that our childhood was difficult or maybe our parents did something wrong. But the truth is, everybody has trauma. Not everybody has maybe big T trauma that was incredibly heavy, neglectful, something clinically relevant trauma. But there were definitely things for all of us that were traumatic and they stayed there. So when we heal that, we free ourselves from that wounded part of us, that traumatized part of us. And then we are free to become the parents that we want, and we can align our values, our parenting values, our values in general with the way that we are, with our healed self. So I want to open it up to see if anybody had any questions about kind of like triggers or what's happening in the system before we go on to talk about EFT. Oh, check in the chat too if there was anything like that. All right. Okay, I'll take that as there's no question. So let's go talk about EFT. So what is it? As I said, it stands for Emotional Freedom Technique or tapping. And the reason why it's called tapping is because that is what you're doing. You are tapping, kind of like in that picture, you know, when she's doing it, that's what you're doing. We're going to get up to a slide that describes the points that we're going to be using, and we're going to be tapping on those points with our fingers. EFT is a somatic therapy, and the reason it's somatic means that we are using the body to access our emotions. What I love about it is because of where the tapping points are located, they are located directly on certain parts of our nervous system. So we are having this very clear connection with our nervous system when we're tapping. It is allowing our body to create a very different relationship with whatever we're healing. So EFT, when we talk about the problem while tapping, we have two parts to it. There's a lot of negative, talking about the negative, and then we eventually bring in some positive reframes. Now, I know talking about the negative might seem really weird for a lot of people because we've been in the positive psychology era for quite some time. But the truth is, when we talk about the negative in the safe environment that includes tapping, which is rhythmic and predictable and allows our physical body to calm down, we get to re-experience those same traumatic and negative memories in a very different way. We get to feel them in this calm way so that our nervous system can finally let go of the fear, of the freeze, or the need to flee that it has held on to for years. And that's why I find that it works really, really well for letting go of any sort of negative memories, traumas, emotional blocks, anything like that. So as I said before, while I use EFT primarily only for mental health, it works on a lot of different things. It also works on physical health, and people, you can, work on chronic and acute illnesses with it. It works well with autoimmune disease because, as we find out in research, autoimmune disease is very tied to our emotions and to trauma, eating disorders, cortisol imbalances, migraines, any sort of things like that. And obviously it works with a lot of mental health, which is depression, anxiety, PTSD, phobias, and even for burnout and stress. Like, you could use EFT daily to just boost your nervous system when you're really stressed out and you're having a hard time. So here are the points that we're going to be using, and I'll go through them. So when we get to do the tapping, you are able to follow along. So when we start over here, and it's called the karate chop point, and it's the side of your hand, the fleshy part. And you can use as many fingers as you want to tap on it. And that's where we do what's called the setup statement. Next, I like to go to the top of the head, and I use all of my hands, all of my fingers, both hands. You can use just one hand. And it doesn't have to be precise here. You could really move it around the crown or just kind of tap on the top wherever you like. The next point that we use is the eyebrow point, and it really is where your eyebrows begin. So wherever they begin is where you're tapping. I usually do it with two fingers. You could totally do it with one if that feels comfortable. Next point that we do is the side of the eye, and it's just on the bone, right on the side of your eye. Next one is under the eye, same thing, directly under the eye on the bone over here. Next one is under the nose, so it's between your lip and your nose. Next one is called the chin point, but we're not tapping on the chin, we're tapping in the indent between the chin and the lips. Then we do the collarbone, which is just the knobby parts of our collarbone right here. And again, two hands or one, doesn't matter. Then we do under the arm, and it's just not in your armpit, but a little bit lower, just under here. And then we repeat again. We usually go through the karate chop point, top of the head, and then eyebrows, side of the eye, under the nose, chin point, collarbone, and then under the arm. And that's how we finish up. So these are the points. And so with the points, you do not have to be symmetrical with them. So even though we usually do at least 2 rounds, if you don't feel like switching sides, you don't have to. It is not necessary. Their symmetry isn't important here, so it's up to you. You could switch and make sure it's symmetrical. You don't have to switch. It's perfectly fine. It doesn't really affect anything because again, our nervous system comes out to both sides. So we're good however we do it. So the tapping procedure is actually really, really simple. So what we do is we take the SUDS, and the SUDS stands for subjective units of distress scale. And I explain it to you as if you've ever been to the emergency room or ever had to describe to your doctor like how bad your pain is from a scale of like 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, that's SUDS. That's what you're doing. So before we begin tapping, whatever issue we're tapping on, we want to take the SUDS and say what the number is. So 0 being the issue doesn't bother me at all, which we probably wouldn't be tapping on something like that. 10 being I'm in crisis. Basically, this issue is so intense that I don't know what to do with it. 5 being like, it's on my mind. I'd like it gone, but I'm functioning. After we take the SUDS and kind of either write down the number or just remember it, we create a setup statement. And a setup statement is the statement that has 2 parts. It has the negative part, which is the problem part, and the positive part. It usually sounds like this. Even though I have this problem, that's the negative part, I love, accept, and forgive myself. That's the positive part. And that's our setup statement. And then we have what's called the reminder phrase, which is basically as we tap through the points, it's whatever reminds us of what that problem is that we're tapping on. Well, I do 2 rounds of tapping and then check in with people unless I'm seeing that there's something that people are really in it, and then we continue tapping. But for demonstration, we usually do 2 rounds, then we stop, we retake the SUDS. And it's important because it actually allows us to see, was there a difference during the time that we tapped? Did the number stay the same? Did the number go up? Did the number go down? It gives us clues as to what kind of came up for us. So that's really all to the procedure, which is very simple. So this is what I was talking about, the setup phrase, and this is what we're going to be tapping on. I'm going to I'm going to stop screen. Well, actually, let's look at this. So our setup statement is going to be, even though I find it too hard to keep my cool when my children misbehave, I love, accept, and forgive myself. And our reminder phrases are going to be something about, it's hard to keep my cool. I feel angry and out of control. It's not safe to let them behave like this. So the reminder phrases can be the same thing. They can be slightly different things, but as you'll see, I come up with my scripts all on my own. So they don't really follow a formula. It's kind of like what I feel is working. So before we start tapping, I want to see if anybody had any sort of questions about the procedure, what we're doing, or any concerns maybe. All right. Well, so what we're going to do, I'm going to pull up the script that I wrote, and I will share here, let me share the script for you guys. If somebody wants to kind of view it as we're doing it, you can go into the chat and kind of read it, and you'll have access to it. It's just a Google Doc, so even afterwards you can look at it. So what we're going to do for tapping, it's very simple. You just got to sit down wherever you're sitting, be comfortable. And we're going to start by just taking a few deep breaths. We're just going to breathe in for 3. 1, 2, 3. We'll hold for 3. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to breathe out for 3. 1, 2, 3. We're going to do it one more time. Breathe in for 3. 1, 2, 3. Hold for 3. 1, 2, 3. Breathe out for 3. 1, 2, 3. And what I'd like you to do is the setup statement that we talked about, which is going to be, even though I find it too hard to keep my cool when my children misbehave, I'd like you to take the SUDS and rate it from a scale of 0 to 10, how truthful that is for you and how activating that is for you. So take a moment to either write it down or just to remember it. And now, as we're ready, we're going to start tapping. So we're going to start on the karate chop. Oh, Clarissa.
Yeah, do you have any recommendations for people who don't have kids?
So maybe think about when you were a kid and your parents misbehaved, not your parents misbehaved, you misbehaved and your parents lost your cool. And so even though it might mean that you might have to change the words a little bit, but what I want you to do is, if the words don't resonate, tune into that feeling of what it felt like when you misbehaved as a child and your parents punished you in any sort of way and lost their cool. And see how that feels, if there's like a memory that's still maybe really activating. All right. Okay, so let's start. We're gonna start on the karate chop. And for anyone who doesn't have children, instead of saying that even though I find it too hard to keep my cool with when my children misbehave, you could say that even though I found it very hard when my parents lost their cool when I misbehaved, I love, accept, and forgive myself. All right, but for anyone who is a parent, our setup statement is, even though I find it too hard to keep my cool when my children misbehave, I love, accept, and forgive myself. Even though I feel angry and out of control, I love, accept, and forgive myself. Even though I don't feel safe letting them continue with this behavior, I love, accept, and forgive myself. Gonna go top of the head. I'm feeling so angry and out of control right now. Eyebrow points. I don't feel safe with all these big emotions. Side of the eye. I'd never be allowed to behave like this when I was a kid. Under the eye. If I behaved like this, my parents would have already smacked me. Under the nose. I am so overwhelmed with all of this. I don't know what to do. Chin point. I feel just as out of control as my kids, and I know I'm scaring them. Collarbone. I am so embarrassed, but I can't stop. Under the arm. I don't know any other way to handle this. Karate chop. I acknowledge that I am out of control in this situation. Top of the head. And I'm allowing myself to recognize that it's okay. Eyebrow point. I can't control the actions and emotions of my children. Side of the eye. I can only allow myself to take a deep breath and make a different choice. Under the eye. I do not have to react that way that my parents reacted to me. Under the nose. I can allow myself the time and space to realize that my kids are just being kids and it's okay. Chin point. My kids are allowed to have big emotions and I'm allowed to just let them. Collarbone. We are all safe to experience our emotions. They are not too big to handle. And under the arm. I can allow myself to stay present and grounded in this moment and not worry about the future. All right, and you can take another deep breath and check in with yourself. Take that suds again and see if that number that you originally had, what happened to it? Did it stay the same? Did it go up? Did it go down? Did any insights or thoughts come into your head as you were tapping? And if you're ready to share or are willing to share any of it, I'd love to hear it. Lighter and tingly, yeah. So I'm trying to bring up the share screen of again so that I can share a little bit about like things that that you might be feeling, which is, it is our body and it is our nervous system, and the way our nervous system lets go of it is the way that it works with a lot of what we consider alternative energy healing, even though it's not necessarily this alternative. There's tingles, There is different sensations that can come up in our body through it all. Sometimes you might feel that if the number isn't going down, but instead we're feeling more activated, you might feel things like anxiety spike. And a lot of the times that feels like, chest tightening or stomach tightening. Maybe your shoulders feel heavier, things like that. So that can happen. Another thing that happens, because everybody experiences this differently, you might have thoughts or memories that pop through that weren't there before you started tapping, which is always kind of interesting, how that works, that we might experience some sort of a memory that's actually sitting in there, but we don't consciously know that it's sitting in there, but it is, and it's ruling everything. Yeah, so it could be images as well. So any sort of things like that. So I'm just curious if anybody else has anything that they can share, that maybe something came up, maybe anyone who doesn't have kids and tuned into instead of a memory of, of themselves as a little kid, if something came up. No? Okay. And that happens too. Sometimes the process is really interesting in the sense that, like, at the moment, nothing comes up. And then as you let your body percolate a little bit, things come up. And it's like all of a sudden the memory that you never thought about is coming to you. So definitely it can be a long process as well, because it's not always as simple as, oh, something came up in the moment, I processed it in the moment, because some people are just slower processors. So that's pretty much all that I had for you guys today. So I'd love to hear if there are any other questions about anything. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know what I just did. But let me share some of, I can't hear you for some reason.
Oh, weird.
Oh, well, now I can hear you.
Okay.
I don't know what. So let me share my website. Oh, yes, I love that, Helen. Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of the times it does unlock some compassion as well. Like as I was saying, self-compassion is a big part of it. When we see our parents as human, it sometimes helps us heal what is underneath, because then you're kind of realizing that they did the best that they could. And maybe it wasn't always the best, but they tried.